The engine let out a tired groan as the early morning bus hissed to a stop at the corner of Jefferson and Pine. The sun hadn't even fully risen yet, but the seats were already half full. Workers in neon vests, nurses with sleep in their eyes, a few teens too wired from energy drinks to feel the cold. Then he stepped in. A young man in crisp camis, posture locked like he was still on base. Blonde buzz cut, clean-shaven, backpack slung perfectly tight. He didn't look around, just scanned, calculated, then moved toward the front. "Move it, old man," he barked, as the black driver wiped the mirror and opened the door without flinching. "Some of us have jobs." No one laughed, not because it wasn't funny, but because that kind of tone cut sharp at this hour. The driver didn't respond, not with a word. He just pressed the door control, and the bus wheezed shut. His boots were heavy, military style, not the company-issued black slip-ons the other drivers wore. His jacket? Faded navy blue, collar slightly frayed. No patches, no pins, but it sat on his frame like it used to mean something. He didn't greet anyone, never did. No good morning, no forced small talk. Just a glance into the mirror, a gear shift, a turn of the wheel, like it was all muscle memory, and maybe it was. The recruit took a seat, third row back on the right, kept his jaw tight, eyes forward. He didn't look bothered anymore. He looked curious. The ride was silent, just the hum of the engine, the quiet shuffle of coats, the occasional cough. The kind of silence that feels like something's waiting to happen. Then it did. As the bus made a slow turn down Ridge Avenue, the rising sun hit just right, slipping through the side window, cutting across the driver's arm. His sleeve was rolled exactly one turn up, just below the elbow. And for a second, just a flash, the recruit saw it. A tattoo, not just any ink. An anchor, an eagle, a trident. The seal insignia. His breath caught. He blinked hard. Looked again. The tattoo was faded, nearly washed out by time and sun, but unmistakable. The young recruit froze, not because of the symbol, but because of who it was on. The man he had just insulted. The one behind the wheel. The one who hadn't said a single word. The one who had been scanning every mirror, every blind spot, every face. Not like a bus driver, but like a man who never stopped running patrol. The recruit sat up straighter. He wasn't alone. The woman across the aisle noticed it too. Her eyes went wide. Then the man behind her followed her gaze. It spread like a current, subtle, but electric. And then, for the first time since they left the depot, the bus driver spoke. His voice was low, calm, but it hit the air like a command. "Clock's ticking, sailor." That was it. Nothing more. But the entire bus went dead still, because now everyone had the same question frozen in their minds. Who the hell is this man? He was always the first to arrive at the depot, long before the sun broke the horizon, long before dispatch finished their first coffee. They didn't ask why. No one did anymore. His name tag read Thomas, but most of the other drivers just called him Old Timer or Boots. The nickname came from those heavy military-style boots he wore, thick-soled and worn at the edges. Every other driver used the company uniform, black shoes, company-issued cap, and bright name badge. Thomas never bothered. No one made him. His jacket, faded navy, had no patches, but it fit like it used to hold rank. The younger guys whispered about him in the break room. "Bet he still dreams in bus routes," One of them chuckled, sipping from a cracked coffee mug. Probably forgets where he lives, just drives in circles all day. They laughed, but not too loud. Even the bold ones kept their distance. Thomas didn't engage, didn't smile, didn't flinch. He'd just walk the length of his bus, checking mirrors, wiping dust from corners no passenger ever noticed. Every gauge, every tire, every hinge. Checked like a man prepping for deployment, not a public transit route. The depot manager once said quietly, "Man's been driving this route for 12 years. Never late. Not once. Not in a blizzard. Not during a flood. Not even when half the city shut down." Another supervisor muttered back, "I think he's seen worse than any snowstorm." Thomas never confirmed anything. He didn't eat lunch with the rest. Didn't complain when schedules changed. Didn't argue when a newer driver got promoted. If the company had policies, he followed them without a word. If the company broke those policies, he still didn't say a word. He was a ghost with boots, always there, but never really with them. The racism in the depot wasn't loud anymore. It wasn't slurs or threats. It was the silence. The way no one sat near him at the table. The way some younger white drivers talked about him. Not to him. The way his requests got lost in the system more than others. Still, he never complained. He drove his route. Same time, same lane, same eyes in the mirror. He'd pass by schools, construction sites, quiet neighborhoods still yawning from the night. Mothers would nod to him from porches. Kids would wave. And Thomas would just lift 2 fingers from the wheel. Not a wave, not a salute. Something in between. He always took a moment at the Market Street stop. That was where an older black woman boarded every Wednesday. She carried too many bags. Wore a coat that had seen better winters. Thomas would wait the extra seconds. Not tap the brakes. Not sigh impatiently. He'd open the door gently. Watch her climb 1 step at a time. Then nod once. Never speaking. Just enough to say, "I see you." People thought he was cold. He wasn't. He was watching. Always watching. When new passengers boarded, his eyes scanned quickly. Not staring, not judging, just scanning. Checking for shifts in posture, hidden tension, unspoken intent. Like someone trained to measure a room before bullets fly. And still, no one really knew who he was. To most, he was just the quiet black driver with old boots and silent eyes. But to the few who watched closely, the way he moved, the way he drove, the way he never missed a detail, something was off. Not wrong. Just different. Something told them he wasn't here because he had to be. He was here because he chose to be. And one day, that choice would mean more than anyone expected. The next morning, the young SEAL recruit boarded again. Same posture, same seat. But this time, something in his face had changed. He didn't say a word to the driver, didn't make a sound as he sat down. But he watched. His eyes tracked every movement Thomas made. The way his hands moved across the dash, how his fingers adjusted the side mirrors, how he checked every angle before pulling off. The recruit noticed how Thomas never slouched. Not once. 3-hour shift, and his spine stayed locked like he was still on active duty. At the 3rd stop, a woman carrying a toddler struggled to climb the stairs. She was black, maybe early 30s, coat slipping off one shoulder, baby half asleep on her hip. Thomas didn't wait. He set the brake, opened the door, and reached out without asking. Not rough, not hesitant. just firm, secure, practiced. He took the diaper bag, handed it to her once she made it inside, and nodded. No words, just that same silent rhythm, steady, respectful, invisible unless you were looking for it. The recruit was looking. He noticed Thomas's left hand had old scars across the knuckles, the kind you don't get from dropping a wrench. He noticed the way his eyes flicked across each passenger who boarded. Just a half-second glance, quick scan, risk assessment. Thomas wasn't being polite. He was reading people. The recruit leaned forward slightly in his seat, watching every detail. That's when he saw it again. The sleeve rolled just enough. The faded lines. Anchor. Eagle. Trident. And he froze all over again. He waited until the bus emptied a little. They were 5 blocks from the Naval Training Center, most passengers gone. The recruit shifted forward, speaking low, like a man asking permission to enter a sacred room. "Sir," he paused, "were you in?" Silence. The engine hummed. Tires rolled smooth against pavement. A red light glowed ahead. Then, finally, Thomas spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I was." 2 words. Nothing more. But the recruit sat back slowly, shoulders straightening like he'd just stood at attention. He didn't press, didn't ask for proof, didn't need a story. Because those 2 words didn't sound like memory. They sounded like weight, like war, like someone who didn't say it for pride, but because it was truth. When they reached the base stop, the recruit stood. He hesitated at the steps, looked back. "Thank you for the ride, sir." Thomas didn't look up, just kept his eyes on the mirror. The recruit stepped off, and Thomas drove on. The next few days, others began to notice too. Another recruit stared a second too long. A civilian nurse nodded more respectfully than usual. Even a teenage boy lowered his volume when Thomas turned to check the back mirror. It wasn't just the tattoo anymore. It was the presence, the calm, the way he moved through tension like it was smoke he'd walked through before. And then, one morning, a group of young white recruits boarded together, all quiet, all watching him. Thomas kept his face neutral. But his grip on the wheel tightened, just for a moment. He wasn't used to being seen. For years, he'd driven like he didn't exist. Let people call him old. Let the depot laugh behind his back. Let supervisors forget to assign him overtime. But now eyes were on him. Not just curious, respectful, worried, awake. Because someone had finally noticed the truth written across his skin, buried under years of silence and sun. The recruit hadn't meant to start anything. He just asked a question. But it was the first time in over a decade someone had looked past the uniform and into the man. And that question? It was about to change everything. The whispers started slow. By Friday, they were echoing across group chats, barracks bunks, and base cafeterias. "You seen the driver on Route 12? Old black guy? Wears boots? Harper says he's former SEAL. Tattoo on his arm." "No way. What's his name?" "No one knows. He doesn't talk." That didn't matter, because in military circles, silence carries weight, especially when it comes with a trident. By Monday, 8 recruits in full uniform were waiting in a straight line at the Jefferson stop. No phones out, no small talk, just stillness. When Thomas pulled up, they boarded one by one. Each gave a silent nod. One of them raised his hand to salute before catching himself and lowering it quickly. Thomas didn't react. He just drove. But his eyes, they paused for a beat longer in the mirror. Not surprised, not amused, just aware. At the next stop, a man stepped on wearing a navy blue uniform so crisp it looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. Lieutenant Colonel James Westfield, Naval Intelligence, and SEAL historian. The recruits stood as soon as they saw him. Westfield didn't look at them. He walked directly to the front, stood beside Thomas, and waited until the door closed. "Sir," he said, voice clear, calm, deliberate. "Permission to ride." The air inside the bus tightened like a rope. Thomas didn't look at him, just pressed the brake, eyes forward. "You got a seat, Colonel." Westfield nodded and sat directly behind him. Silence. Minutes passed. No one moved. Then, quietly, the colonel spoke again. "I reviewed the files. Commander Griggs, SEAL Team 2. 3 tours. Bronze Star with Valor. Listed MIA twice. Completed both missions under fire. Injured. Still returned with all men alive." Thomas's hands gripped the wheel. That name hadn't been spoken in years. That name was buried. "That man," Thomas said slowly, "retired a long time ago." "With respect, sir," Westfield replied, "that's not how it works. You know that better than most." No one spoke after that. But the story moved faster than fire. By that evening, a post hit Reddit. "There's a legend driving Bus 12 in Coronado. Recognize the ink? Anyone know his story?" Comments flooded in. "I rode with him once. He never said a word. Just looked at me like he already knew my whole file. Old man with seal eyes. That's what we called him. My dad said he served under a guy named Griggs. Vanished after retirement. Might be him." The next morning, the bus wasn't half empty like usual. It was packed. Mostly military, mostly quiet. They didn't crowd him, didn't stare. They just sat in calm silence. The kind soldiers know too well. The kind that says, "We see you." Back at the depot, Thomas's name started showing up on screens for the first time in years. Not just as Driver 814, but Griggs T. The HR director pulled up his file, then called the regional supervisor. "Did you know who he was?" The supervisor shrugged. "Just some old black guy who never talked." The HR director didn't respond. He just printed something and quietly walked to the driver bulletin board. Pinned a small paper above the time card reader. "To Commander Griggs, SEAL Team 2. Your silence spoke louder than medals." No announcement, no speech. But the next morning, every driver saw it. Some paused. One veteran removed his cap for a moment before clocking in. Back on Route 12, Thomas didn't react. Didn't mention the new plaque. Didn't speak to the crowd of officers waiting at his first stop. He just checked his mirror, adjusted the wheel, and drove. But for the first time, his name wasn't a mystery. It was a legend, spoken with quiet reverence, because the man they had once ignored was now the man they all stood for. The depot office, normally filled with paper shuffling and lazy gossip, had become unusually alert. Phones rang more often, screens were tilted just out of view. Managers paused when Thomas walked by. They didn't like what was happening. Too many uniforms riding his route. Too many young officers nodding at him. Too much attention for a man they'd quietly hoped would just retire and disappear. Behind closed doors, the regional director narrowed her eyes at the HR report. "You're telling me this? Bus driver is the reason SEAL officers are flooding my route?" The supervisor nodded nervously. "Apparently was a commander. SEAL Team 2, Bronze Star. His name spreading all over base subreddits." She clicked her tongue. "This isn't a military base. It's a transit center. And we don't run hero tours." A meeting was scheduled. They didn't invite Thomas. Instead, they sent a memo. Performance review, Thomas Griggs. Concerns raised regarding uniform compliance, unapproved footwear, and emotional interactions with passengers. It landed on his desk the next morning. He read it once, didn't speak, didn't crumple it, just folded the paper twice and placed it inside his jacket pocket. When he clocked out, they told him to report to HR the following morning. Room 304. He arrived 15 minutes early. 3 people sat behind a wide desk: the HR manager, the operations head, and a district legal officer with a tight suit and a tighter jawline. Across from them, Thomas. No lawyer, no folder. Just his boots, his badge, and silence. The HR manager cleared her throat. "Mr. Griggs, we've noticed a significant increase in disruption on your route." "Disruption?" he asked finally. "Yes, unscheduled stops, military presence, passenger interaction outside standard procedure. There's concern you're encouraging attention." He didn't blink. "Attention," he repeated. "Correct," the legal officer chimed in. "This transit authority is not a stage. You're here to transport civilians, not build a following." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "I drive. Same time, same route, same mirrors. Nothing's changed, except that now, people look." The operations head shifted uncomfortably. "We're not questioning your past, Mr. Griggs." "You are," Thomas replied quietly. "But that's fine. I've been questioned before. Usually by people who couldn't handle the answer." Before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened, and everything shifted. A Navy officer stepped in. Full uniform, rank clear, expression unreadable. No one had invited him. He didn't knock. He walked straight to the empty chair beside Thomas and sat down. "Colonel Eric Lane," he said, placing a folder on the table. "Naval Records and Honors Department." The legal officer frowned. "This is a private HR meeting." "Correction," the colonel replied. "This is now a public matter. You're attempting to discipline a decorated war hero without cause. That concerns us." Silence. He opened the folder. Inside were photocopies, service medals, mission files. A photo of Thomas younger, bloody and smiling beside a helicopter wreckage, arms around 2 wounded soldiers. "You're targeting a man whose actions saved lives most of you couldn't even imagine risking." The HR manager looked down. "Mr. Griggs doesn't want fame," the colonel continued. "He doesn't speak. He doesn't seek recognition. But you made the mistake of trying to silence him again." Thomas didn't move, but something shifted in the room. Power. Respect. Fear. The colonel stood. He'll be returning to his route. No warnings, no reviews, no retaliation. And if you try again... He paused. "Let's just say, it won't be a quiet meeting next time." He looked at Thomas and nodded once. "Thank you, Commander." Then left. No one said anything for a while. Thomas stood, tucked the folded memo back into his jacket, and walked out. He didn't gloat, didn't look back, But that evening, when he climbed into his seat and adjusted the mirrors, something was different. For the first time in 12 years, the dispatch radio crackled. "Route 12, clear to roll. Thank you for your service, Mr. Griggs." He didn't reply. He just smiled. Barely. But it was enough. But something behind him had changed. Just above the emergency kit, secured with 2 rubber straps and a piece of polished plexiglass, sat a folded American flag in a triangular display case. It hadn't been there before. No one asked. No one needed to. The kind of flag that only leaves a funeral folded that way. The kind of flag that says, "A brother's gone home." That morning, Harper, the young SEAL recruit who first noticed the tattoo, stepped onto the bus. He saw it instantly. He didn't speak. He just removed his cap, pressed it to his chest, and took his seat. The other military riders followed one by one. A silent ritual, unspoken but unified. By the time they reached the 3rd stop, the civilian passengers noticed too. No one dared play music. No one dared interrupt the stillness. Thomas drove as always. No tears. No shift in rhythm. But the tension in his jaw, it said enough. At a red light, a teenager boarded, hoodie up, earbuds in, phone blasting some drill beat loud enough to shake windows. He flopped into the front row and rolled his eyes. "Yo, this thing always this slow?" he shouted. "Come on, man, push the gas. I ain't got all day." Nobody answered. Then Harper stood up. Just stood. He didn't raise his voice, didn't clench his fists. He just looked the boy in the eye and said, low and sharp, "Watch your tone." The teen frowned, confused. Harper's voice dropped further. "That man bled, so you could ride this bus and run your mouth. You think you're hard? You don't even know what sacrifice smells like." The teen shifted in his seat. Eyes bounced between Harper and Thomas. Thomas didn't turn around, but his mirror shifted, and his eyes locked onto Harper's reflection. He gave a slow, almost invisible nod. A gesture of thanks, the kind only soldiers understand. When they reached the base gate, the recruits stood again. Each one by one, exited the bus in perfect formation. Not a salute, just a nod, just enough. Thomas stayed silent, but his fingers brushed the glass on the flag case once before closing the door. Later that day, a letter arrived at the depot. It was sealed in navy blue paper, addressed to the transit director. Inside was a single handwritten note. No signature, no title. Just 10 words. "Some heroes don't wear uniforms anymore, but we still see them." The director taped it beside the dispatch window, where every driver picked up their route sheets. By that weekend, no one questioned why Route 12 had gone clean. No litter, no graffiti, no loud teenagers with open food wrappers. It had become more than a bus route. It had become a space of respect, a place where new recruits watched more than they spoke, where civilians learned what presence looked like. And Thomas? He never changed. Still didn't talk. Still wore the same boots. Still rolled the sleeve to just below the elbow. Not to show off the tattoo, but not to hide it either. It was there, just like the past. Just like the weight that never leaves, but learns to ride quiet. At the next Navy graduation ceremony, Harper stood tall among his class. They gave him a leadership pin, noting exceptional discipline and situational awareness. When the Admiral asked who inspired his growth, Harper smiled faintly. "An old bus driver," he said. The room chuckled politely. But Harper didn't laugh. He just said, "He taught me how to sit straight without saying a word. Taught me that real power doesn't come from yelling. It comes from showing up every single day, especially when no one notices." No one clapped, not out of disrespect, but because in that moment they all remembered someone, and they all stood a little straighter too. 3 more winters, 3 more graduation classes, 3 more 1,000 silent bus rides. Thomas never missed a shift. He never showed up late. He never broke routine. He never gave a speech. But every time a young soldier stepped onto Route 12, they carried themselves a little different. They adjusted their posture, tucked their shirt tighter, lowered their voice. Because they weren't just riding a city bus. They were stepping into something sacred, a moving reminder that greatness doesn't always announce itself. One early January morning, frost still clinging to the corners of windshields, an email landed in every driver's inbox. Subject line: Retirement, T. Griggs, effective Friday. No ceremony planned, per request. No send-off cake. No farewell speech. No framed certificate. Just a name, a date, and silence. But the city had other plans. On that final morning, Thomas arrived at the depot at his usual time, 4:45 a.m. His bus had already been pulled out, cleaned, detailed, polished. Inside, a small envelope sat on the dashboard. He didn't open it. He just placed it in his pocket. As he turned the key and powered up the dash, something caught his eye. All the other buses had been moved, formed into a wide semicircle around the exit gate. In the middle of the lot, a brand-new stone monument had been installed overnight. Simple, clean. Etched in black granite were the words, "Heroes don't announce themselves. They just keep showing up." Thomas read it once, then pressed the ignition. Route 12 rolled forward for the last time. As he turned the corner toward the first stop, he saw them. Every seat at every station along the route was full. Veterans, active duty officers, recruits, all dressed in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of service. They didn't wave, they didn't speak. They simply stood as the bus arrived, boarded quietly, sat in silence. By the time the bus reached its final stop, not a single empty seat remained. No one checked their phones. No one looked out the windows. They all just sat with the kind of stillness you only learn after war. When Thomas pulled into the final terminal, the entire lot was lined with people. 200, maybe more. Not with signs or cameras, but with hands at their sides, feet together, eyes forward. He shut down the engine, stood slowly, and for the first time removed his jacket, folded it, placed it neatly on the driver's seat, then stepped off the bus. As he walked down the center aisle, not a single person moved. No one clapped, no one saluted. They simply stood. One by one, as he passed, they made space. A corridor of reverence. At the edge of the lot, a navy blue pickup waited. Harper stood beside it, now in full uniform. His rank had grown. Lieutenant? Maybe higher. He opened the passenger door. "Need a ride, Commander?" Thomas paused, then nodded once. "Appreciate it, Lieutenant." He climbed in, didn't look back. But as they pulled away, the depot faded behind them in the mirror. Not just a place of work anymore, but something else entirely. A living memory. A silent legend. A message to every person who had ever been overlooked. You don't have to raise your voice to be remembered. You don't have to wear a title to lead. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just have to keep showing up, day after day, even when the world stops seeing you. Especially then.